Ikahara appeared next to him with incredible speed, making Kanagi stop and look to his side. Ikahara apologized and told him he had seen enough. He added that the 30 seconds were up, then hit Kanagi on the nape, causing him to slowly fall asleep. As Kanagi fell to the ground, Ikahara thought he could see that Kanagi was a genius, but not on the same level as his comrades. In the end, Kanagi couldn't fully demonstrate the power Ikahara had glimpsed. Ikahara called his secretary, telling her they should head back and expressing his disappointment with the result. Suddenly, Kanagi grabbed his sword, and Ikahara felt a strong aura behind him. Kanagi, now under Hinoki's control, asked Ikahara what he had said. Ikahara looked back and saw Kanagi releasing a powerful aura. Hinoki, controlling Kanagi's body, told Ikahara that the stubborn brat was already in bed, so he could finally use the body. Hinoki then walked closer to Ikahara and suggested they should play a little bit longer. Kanagi's spirit, out of his own body, panicked when he saw that Hinoki was now controlling it. However, Ikahara smiled, recognizing the presence he had felt earlier. This made him question if it was a different person or just a skill, but regardless, he knew that Kanagi was now a monster. Kanagi then attacked and shouted at him not to space out. He noticed that Kanagi's movements had changed, his speed and power were on a different level. Suddenly, Ikahara felt a sword near his face and ducked just in time to dodge it. Kanagi swung his sword again, and Ikahara leaped away to create distance. Still in shock, Kanagi positioned his sword and swung it once more, but Ikahara bent down in time, causing Kanagi to slash the building behind him instead. The students inside the building rushed away in panic, realizing the danger. Ikahara noticed that Kanagi's slashes were becoming unpredictable, yet he could anticipate his opponent's movements. It felt like ancient swordsmanship to him, like a torrent of water. Ikahara stretched out his palm, laughingly telling Kanagi that such skill was needed to defeat an S rank like him. He then raised his palm to make Kanagi sleep again, noting that only 40 seconds had passed. But Kanagi moved closer with incredible speed and swung his sword, shouting that there was no way Ikahara could hit him. Ikahara jumped away to dodge the attack and laughingly told Kanagi that his skills were amazing. The students couldn't believe what they were witnessing, or that Ikahara Midori was on the defensive. Kanagi shouted that Ikahara was boring and that there was no need to hold back against him. He also warned Ikahara that he would beat him up if he looked down on him. Kanagi then leaped to attack, but Ikahara laughed and replied, "Fine." He kicked a stone and it headed into the weapons behind him. All the weapons float in the air. Ikahara jumped, surprising Kanagi, and grabbed one of the weapons floating above them. He excitedly tells Ikahara that he's finally going all out. They then engage in an intense mid-air battle, foot on foot, stunning the students who watch in amazement. They grab every weapon in sight and shatter them into pieces with their sheer strength. Meanwhile, inside Kanagi's body, the founders observe Hinoki going full throttle. They are impressed that Ikahara manages to hold his own against Hinoki. One founder, feeling envious, remarks on the fun and pitiful nature of not being the one to fight while he watches in silence. One of the founders asks if this means Kanagi's body isn't yet a perfect vessel. An old man suggests joining the fray, but another founder tells him to stop, calling him tactless. The great wizard silently stares, surprised to realize that he is studying Hinoki's movements, trying to learn from them. He notices Hinoki pouncing from below, shifting his center of gravity, but the sword Hinoki wields shatters into pieces once again. Hinoki, frustrated by the low-quality sword, feels a surge of anger. Ikahara, on the other hand, finds the battle exhilarating, his heart racing with excitement. However, Ikahara notices that there are no swords left and wonders if Kanagi will resort to using firearms. Ikahara then taunts Hinoki, shouting that there are only 10 seconds left and teasingly asks what he'll do now. Hinoki glances back at the building behind him and leaps toward it. He heads for the man who had pushed Kanagi earlier and snatches the man's sword. Just then, Ikahara jumps closer, launching his fist at Hinoki, causing a loud explosion upon impact with the building. Fortunately, Hinoki dodges the attack and reappears in front of Ikahara. They resume their mid-air battle, foot on foot, enjoying the fight as if it were a game. Ikahara shouts that it's fun and suggests they continue a bit longer, while the students notice their building is on the verge of collapsing. The combatants reach the top of the building where Ikahara's secretary watches intently. Ikahara then places his hand on a huge fan and grabs it, causing it to crack. He sees Ikahara take out the fan from the headmaster's room and aims it at him. Ikahara then threw the fan at him, but he was surprised when Hinoki used his one-handed sword style to slash the fan before it hit him. The fan shattered into tiny pieces, and Ikahara shouted excitedly, telling him he was truly amazing. However, Hinoki simply launched his sword, telling Ikahara to eat it. Yet, to his shock, the sword shattered into pieces. Ikahara raised his hand, aiming at him. Ikahara then told him that 60 seconds had passed and launched his palm at Hinoki, causing him to fall. Hinoki cursed, but then Kanagi jumped onto Hinoki's back, shouting "not yet," and pushed Hinoki back towards the other founders. He then gently tapped Ikahara's palm aside, dodging Ikahara's attack, which shocked both Hinoki and Ikahara. However, one of his hands was dislocated from the impact. Still, he told Ikahara that he only needed a single hit and punched Ikahara in the face with his other hand. The battle between the singularities felt like it lasted an eternity from the inside, a fierce struggle for a seemingly small answer, akin to a chess game where both players are equally skilled. Hinoki knew that despite the intensity, it had only lasted a brief moment. He smiled proudly, realizing that Kanagi had opened a new path to victory. However, Kanagi was in shock when he saw that Ikahara had stopped his fist in time. He cursed, knowing he hadn't hit him, but then Ikahara smiled and pulled his fist to his face, surprising him. Ikahara then happily told him that he had passed before they both slammed into the ground. A moment later, the students watching were confused, asking what had happened. Ikahara, holding Kanagi, collapsed and called his secretary, Rin, telling her they should go back. Rin appeared next to Ikahara, asking how it went. Ikahara replied that Kanagi had passed and that he was interesting. But since he had accidentally broken Kanagi's arm, she should help fix it. She replied that she understood. The students, hearing Ikahara, couldn't believe that Kanagi had passed. Suddenly, they cheered for him, realizing that passing meant he had landed a hit on Ikahara, which woke Kanagi up. Rin, who was healing him, told him to let her heal his arm and not to move, which he agreed to, thanking her. Rin then congratulated him on passing the test. Kanagi thanked her for the compliment, but then sat up in shock, asking if he had really passed and if he had truly landed a hit on Ikahara. Suddenly, Ikahara appeared next to him, saying it was cruel for him to forget so soon, shocking Kanagi. Ikahara then told him that they were even now and a pass is a pass. He mentioned that he went serious midway through his consecutive attacks, but Hinoki didn't respond, knowing it was true. Ikahara also praised him, saying he dodged his strongest attack and his movements were amazing, urging him to be proud. Kanagi excitedly replied, yes. Kanagi then called out to Ikahara, asking what comes next after passing, making Rin look at Ikahara in confusion. Ikahara, also unsure, stared back at Kanagi, searching for an answer as the students watched intently. Later that night, at his house, his mother was frying food when she asked him how many guests were coming. While cleaning the house, he replied that he didn't know, probably only one person. His mother remarked that today was a good day, on top of passing the hunter's examination. He was being scouted by Ikahara Midori. She then told him that she always believed he was a kid who could achieve anything with effort. He warmly replied, yes. However, his mother worriedly commented that for such a celebrity to visit their house, it might be mistaken for a dog house. He shouted back that Ikahara was not that kind of person. After cleaning and helping his mother, he lay on his bed to rest and stared at Ikahara's card, wondering why Ikahara hadn't given it any thought. His mind wandered back to the field, recalling Rin taking Ikahara down and Ikahara screaming in pain. Ikahara had asked him if he didn't say he would become one of his comrades if he won. He replied, thinking he hadn't heard such words, making Rin more furious as she tightly grabbed Ikahara's feet, causing him to scream in pain. Ikahara then told him that there were too many eyes around and asked if he could visit his home tonight to discuss things in detail. He promised to explain the choices available and reveal who their real enemies were. He pondered who their real enemies could be, knowing that the tower was already destroyed by the founders and that the current hunter's task was to hunt the monsters that had escaped from the dimensional crack. He wondered if there was any other reason, but then he fell asleep. Suddenly, Hinoki shoutingly woke him up, startling him. He saw that Hinoki and the founders were there. He asked why everyone was there and what was wrong, but Hinoki simply replied that they had been discussing something and had just finished. Confused, he covered his body and asked Hinoki if they had decided who would get his body. Before Hinoki could reply, the doorbell rang. Apologizing to Hinoki, he explained that he thought Ikahara had arrived and suggested they talk about it later. He then walked to the kitchen near the door, noticing it was dark and wondering what was happening. To his shock, he saw his mother lying on the floor, collapsed. Panicking, he called out to her in worry. He rushed to his mother but stopped when he saw someone sitting in the kitchen. He saw the person grab the food his mother had made and eat it happily. Watching the man eat and compliment the food, he noticed the kitchen was a mess. The man teased him, saying he had to discipline his old lady and, if he wanted to impress customers, they should at least use expensive meat. He asked the man who he was and what he had done to his mother, but the man shouted at him to watch his mouth and introduced himself as Heitani Goru, the S-rank hunter who had come to pick him up and was one of Ikahara Midori's comrades. Heitani then told him to hurry up and take his luggage because they were moving to their base. Enraged, he launched his fist at Heitani, who dodged it and laughingly appeared behind him, asking if he was challenging him. He remained silent, remembering his mother telling him that even though his father had passed away, she would raise him alone to be a proud person. He recalled his mother's shoes being a mess, but she had told him it was fine and she could still wear them. She reminded him not to forget to buy himself new sneakers and congratulated him for doing a great job, promising to make his favorite tonkatsu for dinner. He then looked seriously at Heitani and demanded to know what he had done to his mother. Hinoki noticed that Kanagi's opponent was an S-rank hunter from that era and told everyone it was about time to act. Although he was annoyed just by looking at Ikahara's rip-off, they all knew from that fight how the founders should treat Kanagi from now on. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment part 2 in the comments section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.